As you learned in the previous section, prorations ensure that the buyer and seller each pay their fair share of expenses and receive their fair share of income based on how many days each party owns the property. Understanding prorations prepares you to read a closing statement with confidence and to help clients understand why certain debits and credits appear. In this section, you will learn how prorations are actually calculated. The two primary methods are the 12-month 30-day method and the 365-day method. These methods differ in how they count days, but the goal is the same. Calculate each party's proportional share of a yearly or monthly item. When prorations are done correctly, neither the buyer nor the seller pays more than their rightful share. Since local custom often dictates which method is used, a professional agent must recognize both approaches. Understanding local custom and closing day ownership. Most states treat the seller as owning the property up to and including the day of closing. This means the seller is responsible for all financial obligations through that day, unless the contract states otherwise. The buyer becomes responsible beginning the day after closing. Because prorations depend on who owns the property on specific days, the closing date is included in the seller's portion unless agreed differently. If the contract does not specify which proration method to use, settlement agents follow local custom. In some areas, the 12-month 30-day method is considered standard. In others, the 365-day method is the norm. A knowledgeable agent can quickly interpret either method and explain why a figure looks the way it does. 12-month 30-day method. The 12-month 30-day method, sometimes called the banker's year method, assumes every month has 30 days and every year has 360 days. This creates a uniform structure that simplifies calculations and is often used for interest, insurance premiums, and many prepaid items. To compute an annual proration using this method, you begin by identifying the total yearly amount of the item. Then you divide by 12 to find the monthly amount, and divide again by 30 to find the daily rate. You then apply the seller's months and days of ownership to compute their share. The buyer's share is the remainder. For example, if annual property taxes are $4,200 and closing occurs on April 15th, the seller owns the property for 3 full months plus 15 days. After finding the monthly and daily amounts, you multiply accordingly to calculate the seller's portion. For monthly items, such as rent collected in advance, you simply divide the total monthly amount by 30 to find the daily rate and multiply by the seller's days of ownership. If rent of $1,500 is paid on the 1st of the month and closing occurs on the 10th, the seller owns the property for 10 days. Their share is the daily rate times 10, and the buyer receives the rest. This method is straightforward, creates clean numbers, and is widely used even when months vary in actual length. 365-day method. The 365-day method, sometimes called the actual day method, uses the real number of days in a year and the real number of days in each month. This method produces the most precise calculation and is typically preferred when accuracy is essential. For annual items, you divide the yearly amount by 365 to find the daily amount. In a leap year, you divide by 366. You then multiply the daily amount by the seller's total number of days of ownership. The remainder belongs to the buyer. For monthly items, such as rent or utilities billed monthly, you divide the monthly amount by the actual number of days in the month, 28, 29, 30, or 31, and multiply by the seller's days of ownership. For example, imagine a homeowner's insurance premium of $1,095 for the year. To prorate using the 365-day method, divide 1,095 by 365 to get $3 per day. If the seller owns the property for 120 days of the year before closing, their prorated share is $360. The buyer's share is the remainder, $735. This method reflects true day counts and helps avoid rounding issues that can affect high-value items. Choosing the correct method. Both proration methods are accurate as long as the method is used consistently and agreed upon by the parties or required by local practice. Title companies and lenders often have established procedures that determine which method will be used. A real estate professional must be prepared to explain both, especially when representing clients who are new to real estate or who are comparing figures between the loan estimate, closing disclosure, and final settlement statement. Review summary. In this section, you learned the two primary methods used to compute prorations. The 12-month 30-day method simplifies months and years to create consistent values, while the 365-day method uses actual calendar days for maximum accuracy. Both methods divide expenses and income fairly between the buyer and seller and ensure that neither party pays beyond their share of ownership. You also learned that the seller typically owns the property through the day of closing unless the contract says otherwise, and that local custom determines which proration method applies when no method is specified. This understanding allows you to interpret closing statements, verify proration figures, and confidently assist your clients in reviewing and approving their final numbers. Discussion: why is it necessary for real estate professionals to understand both proration methods? Answer: because different regions and settlement agents use different methods, and agents must be able to explain any number on a closing statement clearly to prevent confusion or disputes. How does assigning the closing date to the seller affect prorations? Answer: assigning the closing date to the seller increases the seller's prorated responsibility by 1 day and reduces the buyer's share accordingly, ensuring each pays for the exact period they own the property. Why might the 365-day method be preferred in certain situations? Answer: it uses actual calendar days, making it more precise, especially for high-value expenses where small rounding differences could matter. How does the choice of proration method affect the final settlement figures? Answer: although both methods aim for fairness, they may produce slightly different results. Understanding both helps agents clarify why amounts differ between preliminary estimates and final closing statements. Closing remarks. Prorations are a vital part of the financial settlement process, allowing buyers and sellers to share expenses and income fairly. A professional who understands proration methods can anticipate questions, spot calculation errors, and reassure clients throughout the closing process. As transactions become more complex and settlement software varies between companies, your confidence in explaining prorations will strengthen your role as a trusted guide in the closing experience.